has some technical issues, so he'll be back. He'll be in a second.
No, that's fine. Well, I mean, look, while you're here, we might as well sort of get a start and chatting. But so why don't you start by introducing yourself and your business?
Yeah, well, my name is Ali, and together with Jan, my co-founder, we started a consultancy 3 years ago. So the story behind it is that we were both doing a master's degree after we both realized we essentially didn't really want to work for a company, or maybe a better way of saying it is we assumed we were unemployable, essentially.
Right.
Yeah, which,
Hi, Jan.
Hey, Jan.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Very well. So Ali's just introducing himself. So so we'll maybe go around the table in a moment. So yeah. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah. So essentially, well, I guess my background is that I'm Bulgarian.
Right.
I'm Bulgarian, Palestinian, born in Lebanon, raised in Bulgaria. So I'm a mix of 100 different cultures at this point. I don't even know where I'm from. But anyway, so I was raised in Bulgaria, always had a love for IT, but that was about it. I fell in love with IT and stuff through just playing video games, stuff like that. Eventually wanted to do a bachelor's degree, and I ended up going to the University of Northampton at like 18 years old. I did a degree in software engineering there. And after that degree, I went back to Bulgaria with the idea of getting a job and working at essentially some IT company. So I eventually got an internship at a fintech. And I remember just going into that, to the office of the fintech and just kind of getting depressed when looking at the cubicle. And, they were telling me, that we have all of these nice incentives, free beer, pool, I don't know what.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I kind of don't want this, and so at the day I was supposed to start, I just called the person who hired me, and I was like, hey man, I kind of want to back out. Then I backed out. I called my dad and I told him, look, I don't think this is for me. I want to do something with business. I'm gonna look at doing some sort of degree in business, which in like a Middle Eastern household is a big no-no. Usually, yeah. So it's like in Middle Eastern household, when you go and study business, it's like a saying essentially, which is like, if somebody goes and studies business, it means they don't know what they want to do in their life, which, to be honest, that was the case. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It was the case. Yeah. To be honest, it was the case. So
yeah,
I was sitting in like my dad's office, looking through universities, looking where I could apply, what are their programs related to business. And there was this one course called the Masters in Entrepreneurship at UCL. And, I liked the word. I was like, ooh, entrepreneurship. Nice. Okay. I signed up. Eventually went to the UK to do my master's degree at like 21. And I had no idea what the startup was or what even entrepreneurship really meant. All I knew is that I wanted to kind of start a business.
Yeah.
Ended up going there, meeting Jan, and essentially getting exposed to this whole environment and stuff, which we can go into later. But in a nutshell, I think that's my background.
That's really interesting. I've got a couple of questions about that we'll get to later, because that was really interesting. Jan, you take it away. What about yourself?
Yep. Well, Ali is certainly more interesting if it comes to his background. I'm quite boring. I'm from Poland. So almost Bulgaria, but not really. I grew up in a family of lawyers actually as well. So my dad is a lawyer. My mom is...
Yeah, you're right. Let's move on. Let's move on. No, I'm joking.
I was this close to becoming a lawyer when I was younger.
Yeah.
But if you want to become a lawyer, if it's Poland, then you need to stay in Poland, study Polish law.
Right.
I'm not gonna stay in Poland for this long. I also didn't want to stay in the UK or US long term, so law was kind of out. It was not on the table for me.
Yeah.
And I was quite interested in a lot of magnitude of things. Engineering, physics. I had a period when I was in high school when I wanted to go and study nanotechnology. So there was this new program in my hometown in Poland for the nanotechnology, and I was very close to applying to that, but
you must have to have very good eyes for that though, to be able to see what's happening, right?
Probably
Yeah.
yes. It's pretty good one actually. They built an entire new building to support this, so looked great. But I think it was just a hobby. So I still have this kind of engineering, kind of do things with my own hands hobby. But in terms of career, I went to study business. And again, like Ali says, business is for someone who doesn't really know what they want to do in their life. I didn't.
Correction. Not Ali says. Ali's dad says that.
Well, I say the same thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was interested in so many things that I just thought if I go business, I might maybe get a chance at some point to get involved in those things.
Yeah.
I don't need to pick, whether I go physics or chemistry or engineering. Worst case, I'm just an investor, or I get to do the admin stuff in the project, but I get to work with people like that. I mean, I ended up running a software development company as well. So even though I'm not a software developer, I still have this touch with technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up in Lancaster University. It's up north in the UK. Studied business administration in there. With actually, I did 1 year in HP in London as my placement year.
All right.
And then so I've been always into startups. Before I wanted to start a magnitude of things, mobile apps. I did a furniture startup once as well, which is quite interesting. I went to study a master's in entrepreneurship with Ali. It's quite a specific degree. I mean, Ali called it business, but I don't think it's business in a sense that most people understand. It's not an MBA. It's not a business administration program. It's I would call it a course, actually, a course on the startup process, and a program that gives you the network, because that was the key. We were taught by startuppers, by business people, not by lecturers, and that was the key for me as well. I wanted to get out of this theoretical managerial ground and go into something a bit more practical like this.
So
that's interesting.
This I just want to emphasize, this shows the difference, right? So he had a whole methodological reasoning on why he applied to UCL. Well, in my case, it's like I just don't want to. I wanted to do a business and I had no idea what to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So 2 ways to get to the same point. Yeah.
Exactly.
So excuse me. By the way, I might cough occasionally. I'm recovering from a cold, so I apologize. So tell me about the business then.
Kian, you want to go ahead, or you want me?
Well, it's been 3 years and we still don't have the pitch nailed.
There's no pitch.
Well, no, I'm not saying you don't.
So we started Skillwork around 2.5 to 3 years ago. So we started at the end of 2019.
Right.
That's when we were finishing our degree at UCL. I mean, before we wanted to set something up with Ali. We didn't have a specific idea. We had some things we've been working on, but we thought it's going to be a more traditional startup rather than an agency. But there's an opportunity for us. We were young then. We didn't have any experience, any kind of industry knowledge. That's probably why we decided to go and set up a company as well. I think now with all the knowledge, I would probably say, it's going to be too hard to build something up like this.
Yeah.
So we set it up, and there was an opportunity to work on a project from Bulgaria, some educational platform funded by Erasmus. And we said, why not? Let's try it out. It will give us some money, give us some experience. And somehow we ended up setting up a software development agency. But because we've been so deeply involved with startups and so well passionate about all the different ideas that we had and our course mates had, we decided, we want to focus on startups solely. And we want to answer this question, how do we create a tech team that's the best at serving and working with startups? And at this point, we are going from a software development agency more into a venture builder, which means that we involved ourselves with the founders that we work with so deeply that we almost become their, CTOs and their internal team.
Yeah,
that's the key with working with startups. You just need to have that passion for the project.
It's interesting. I actually had a call yesterday with a fairly new owner of a software business based in the States, and he was asking for some advice because that's what I do, right? I jump on the phone with people, I give advice for free generally. I have my clients, I'm happy, I get paid, I've got a roof over my head. When I've got free time, I'll jump on a call with anyone and just give advice, right? So I did it with this young guy and he was asking about advice for, we're struggling, we're just starting out, we've got the small fish, we've got the small clients, we can't get the big ones. We want the ones with the budget of like 100K, 200K and stuff like that. And we started talking about it, I was like, dude, that's not going to happen. I was like, it's not going to happen because no one knows who you are. You have no credibility. There's no trust. I was like, my best advice to you is, you're sat there going, oh, we've only got a couple of small clients. Get 1,000 small clients. Exactly. That's what you want to do. Get 1,000 small clients because and be with them and hold their hand and give them full support as, and show yourselves as allies to early stage businesses and who want to build MVPs and do it for cheap or do it for free, do it for equity only, do whatever you need to do because if one of those will turn into, one of those will secure Series A funding. And then that's your big fish, and so it's this, and interesting, I said to him, I think that we're going to notice a shift in a lot of the way agencies function, whether it's software agencies, marketing agencies, anything third party like that, in becoming more of this as almost like a team as a service. That like you said, is kind of almost like fractional, that bolts onto your business. And instead of people using that temporarily and then moving on, I think people are going to keep using it.
Yeah, to be honest, you described it perfectly. So this is exactly what's happened with us now. Mind you, we do have a couple of larger corporates, but that's just because of us being at the more mature level now. But a majority of our clients that are the ones, let's say the ones that actually make us money and stuff like that, are those really small scale projects that started off with like a £5,000 budget or something, and now have grown immensely. And it's really nice to see because even a week ago, so around 1 month ago, our client got acquired by a really big company.
Right.
And 1 week ago, the people that acquired him came into our office.
And I've got everything happening in the background, by the way. Have you noticed? Just everything happening.
It's fine.
It's the new world we live in, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. But so their new investors and the CEO of that company came into the office, and they were supposed to be sitting down and talking about the long-term strategy of the company.
Yeah.
And I was at the seat of the table on a seat of the table with them.
Yeah.
Even though technically, in the traditional sense, you wouldn't go and bring your IT outsourcing company to sit down with you and try and make KPIs and business strategy for the next 5 years, because realistically, it doesn't matter to them.
No, but you wouldn't. But you would probably want to. Like in an ideal world, you'd be like, we need someone to communicate this plan. It would be so much easier if they were just here. But I know that they haven't maybe got the competency to understand it, or they may not be interested because they're working on project. They're an agency. They're working on other projects. So it's like and this is what I was saying to this guy yesterday. It's like, this is why I think this model is going to win, because it's going to win out, but it does require individuals like yourselves to have far more than just the basic competency of knowing how to run an agency. It's got to be more than that. And you clearly have that because of your backgrounds. So I think it's very interesting how that's going to evolve. And in a lot of ways, that's exactly what I do. I get a seat at the table too, because I'm there maybe advising from the very small scale sort of commercial advisory stuff, but also right up to the far bigger picture stuff. And it might be that we're very early on in that journey, but I'm going over RevOps, or I'm doing some very hands-on sort of basic stuff. But I'm still going to get invited to the strategy meeting, because we know in the 6 months, once I've done doing that, we're on to the bigger stuff. So it's exactly the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years' time, no one is actually full-time hired in a business. You know what I mean? Everyone's just agency.
Yeah. Well, look, to be honest, the agency part is nice, and it could be like agencies can be a really good thing, but at the same time, the way they are at the moment, and I'm sure you can also just add into this, is that the way traditionally the way they operate at the moment is it's very toxic in a sense that the second they see somebody that has a need, they will try and extract as much value as they can from them without actually giving, let's call it, back the same value, essentially.
Isn't that the same as an employer-employee relationship, really?
It is, but
if we're honest,
it depends on culture. It depends on culture, I think.
For the most part, I think, especially in startup culture, let's be honest. Like, if you've had much experience in startups, it is pretty common that and this doesn't happen all the time, but it is pretty common that you are expected to put in way more work as one of the one of the founding team members and get paid way below market average. So is it really too different? Sorry, Jan, you were going to say something a moment ago.
Yeah, no, I was gonna just agree. The agency model has a very bad connotation in the industry right now, mostly because the barrier to entry is very small.
Right.
So there's a lot of agencies out there that people have really bad experiences with, and that's what we're trying to fight as well. That's something that we're trying. The first question is, why should I work with an agency as a funder? Funders usually, it is expected from them to hire their own people, maybe give some sweet equity and so on. So there are those kind of notions of an agency model that we still need to battle every day. But at the same time, we're quite competitive. Because we go beyond the service the basic service that we do, like you were saying as well. You don't only consult within your specific area, but you put yourself into that managerial kind of coaching position. And you help out with a magnitude of things. I've been migrating data for my clients. I've been preparing some data analysis for them. Well, besides just the technical stuff, I've been organizing sessions where we are talking strategy, not technology. So we try to go beyond just technical help and just coach. I think coaching is probably the best word for it. Just ask the right questions.
Just be available, right? And just say, look, we've got this skill set. Be open and frank about it. We've got this skill set. If you need us, we're here. And wherever you get the opportunity to demonstrate one of those things to add, clarity and to sort of make clear that is not just a false claim, that you actually can demonstrate that ability, then I think that's great. But I think it's interesting though, because it mirrors very much the startup landscape, which is being so competitive. Like, let's be honest, everything is so competitive, right? Especially right now, where we've got as a result of COVID and now mass layoffs, hundreds of thousands of people globally who've been made redundant. We're now seeing a massive increase in new businesses starting up, huge increase in startups being built. And let's be honest, the vast majority will fail. We know that's what will happen. Also, the vast majority of people, even before this, shouldn't have been startup founders for one reason or another, because if not everyone's cut out for it. It's a very, very small amount of people that I think have the correct skill set. And I think we all know that. So now that's just even further magnified, right? So it's already an incredibly competitive space. Any vertical you go into as a startup is incredibly competitive. There's an app for everything, right? There's 5 apps for the same thing. It's just the way it is. So you have to stand out. And the way to do that is skill. It's how many skills can we stack? How many things can I absorb and not necessarily even master, but become pretty good at? Because you don't need to be a master or anything, but you need to be pretty good at stuff. And once you can do that as a founder or even as a startup, and say, look, we're going to offer a pretty good variety of things. Because look, the problem with a lot of software, as you probably know as well, is there's a sort of a pro and con to it. There's like do I really need an app to do this one specific thing, or can I have an app that does everything?
Yeah.
Do I need an app to like look at Google Suite? Do we need another Excel substitute? No, we've got tons. And then on top of that, we've got a whole suite in Microsoft and so on. So it's like, yeah, but someone could really focus in on that and make it really, really great. But then they're making themselves, they're sort of painting themselves into a corner, versus someone who wanted to build a much bigger suite. So it's like, it's kind of that. I don't really know where I was going with that analogy, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, either you really, really focus down on something and become absolutely genius at it, or you have to broaden your horizons to be able to become useful to more than just one line of
early, like we were saying, early startups, early stage startups is where to show a magnitude of different skills. And you have generalists, like for example myself, that are probably the best suited for those early stage startups. But once the startup progresses, goes into a scale up, has more resources, then you need to start hiring people who are whose area is very, very focused, or experts in specific areas. But that early stage generalists are very, very important for the business.
Well, that's the thing. It is generalists, but it's also being, I guess maybe you can coin it as expert generalists. You know what I mean? Because it's even if you're a generalist, that doesn't really mean that you know how to handle, let's say, a startup at the ideation stage, because there's a lot of things that you need to do. You need to have the experience to, in our case, for example, if we're working with a first-time founder, one of the things that more often than not is going to happen is they're going to come in and tell us, I want to build this thing with AI and whatever. And we're the ones who have to tell him no. And instead of doing and we're like, if you want to do that, great, just go work with somebody else. But if you want to work with us, that's not the way to go about it. That's not the way to go about building tech. And we basically have to explain to them that you need to follow, the lean startup methodology, essentially. You have to be lean and focused and do only small iterations rather than really huge pieces of chunks of work and throwing it out there.
Do you know that you've raised a really good point there? That's something that I've noticed to be the difference with individuals like ourselves, because I think we've got very similar ways of working with founders. Ourselves, and say someone who is a bit more sort of focused on one specific service, let's say, that they provide. I do like that sort of specialist generalist thing. Like, the key difference is the ability to say no to a client, I found. And whereas when you are providing the more sort of linear service model, it is, you would never say no to a client. It's like whatever the client wants, you build, because it's assumed that once that's done, the relationship is over. And I find that incredibly short-sighted. And I think that's the difference with the sort of specialist generalist approach, is that it recognizes that the relationship with a client can be for as long as it needs to be. It can be forever, but it needs to start in a place of transparency and honesty. It needs to start with demonstrating, look, we know what we're talking about, and while we're here, we might as well impart that off to you, and hopefully that will benefit us both. So it needs to start in that place of sometimes saying no, which I think a lot of people are too afraid to do when it comes to a business relationship, right?
I definitely agree. And like,
especially when it comes to AI.
Especially when it comes to AI. It's like the second somebody tells us AI, that's the moment we run away. We're like, no, not even close. Go integrate ChatGPT and think it's AI. But
have you seen quite a considerable increase in people sort of
to be honest,
with those sort of ideas?
To be honest, not really, because I think the network that we're like, the way, so a majority of the people that come to us who want to work with us, it's all through, essentially our network, and it's very much a network effect thing. We don't do any sort of, let's call it ads or email cold call, emails or cold calls or any of that. So I think, let's say, the quality of our prospects has increased, in a sense that thankfully a majority of them are at least somewhat familiar with the whole startup methodology, and that they might need AI one day, but they also realize that that's not right now. So I think we're quite blessed with that, I'd say.
I think as well what we're noticing, at least from my perspective as well, is because there are more organizations that are taking this sort of approach. Generally, as a result of that, it's a lot more. The marketing strategy, as you said, is more brand focused, which means it's naturally focused on some sort of content marketing strategy ordinarily, where it's based on giving out free information and wanting to just sort of educate, right, and just pass this information out there. And because of that, I think what we're seeing is a huge increase in availability to expert information. Like you were saying about how both of you wanted to go to that course because it was less focused on the sort of academic approach and more focused on the practical. Like that is what people want now. And we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more transparency of entrepreneurs, successful business people sharing, I did X, Y, and Z. Like this is how I actually did it, as opposed to just, and because of that, I think what we're seeing is a lot more people approach their business for the first time, a lot more prepared, actually, at least in theory, maybe than before.
I definitely agree to that, because honestly, even take us as an example. So Jan and I, when we started off, essentially this company is our first ever job. And so, when we started this off, all we were doing is talking to what you would consider our competitors, other people who own software agencies who are more established than us. And we just continuously have meetings with them, telling them about what our struggles are, them giving us advice, telling us, go explore this, go explore that. So by the time that we got to a point where, let's say, that we are now, we were very prepared, not because of our experience per se, but also because of all of the advice we've been getting from all of our different mentors. And this is something I think that would have, at least from the people we've spoken to who, let's say, are from the older generation, said that they didn't have that level of access to people. So it's like, a great example of it is our contracts. We didn't have the money to get a lawyer to write the contract. Those templates weren't going to be enough for us. And we were talking to one of our mentors, and he's like, "Oh, here's a contract template that I paid the lawyer 20 grand for. Use that." And and it's just that's not a thing that used to happen, and now it's amazing to see the level of support that there is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's just more willingness to share. And I think it's because of that realization, just like the philosophy that you employ with your founders, which is that it's a net win. To do that, it benefits all of us. Like your mentor probably did that because he realized that the more he shares with the people he's mentoring, the more they're going to want to work with him. Like it's a symbiotic relationship. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that by sharing information, everyone wins.
Exactly. A lot of first-time founders and young founders, especially in that space of agencies and so on, or let's say services, B2B, they have this notion that I start a business, I need to compete. And there's always talking about competition, competing with that. It's always about competition, especially in the B2B sector. But we found out that partnerships obviously work much better. So we don't compete. We collaborate, even with companies that could be considered our competition, and just works so much better. And it's a very, you would need to come to Poland, for example, or Bulgaria to see that. But there's a massive difference between how the UK businesses are approaching this topic and how businesses in the Eastern Europe are approaching this topic.
What do you mean? Like they're more the competitive mind in Eastern Europe?
Yeah. So in Poland, in Bulgaria, in general, the notion is that you always have to compete, fight with other businesses. It's always a fight. Business is about fighting with other companies over clients. And in the UK, there is the environment or maybe culture where you collaborate much more. But I'm saying this because in some ways we compete with. We have teams in Bulgaria, for example. So in some ways we compete also with companies in Bulgaria, and it's super easy to get clients because of the fact that we have this different mindset. And also because of the fact that we are, well, in the UK, obviously, and we're technically a British company, even though we do have teams in Bulgaria.
Yeah. To be fair, though, there's nothing more British, in my perspective, than both of your backgrounds. Like, that's... Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, that is what Britain is. Because I didn't mention, but I don't have any English blood in me whatsoever. My mother's French Algerian, right? My father's from Northern Ireland, so obviously beyond that, Germany. And I was born in the UK, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to go back beyond Algeria to Egypt, and then you know what I mean. So I'm surprised I'm even this color, to be honest. I don't know why. It seems incredibly unfair. I blame my father, to be honest, why I'm so transparent. But and for me, there's and I was born and raised in Oxford, and in a house full of we had foreign students always staying with us, so learning English. And for me, being British is not being English. it's having a neighbor on the left from Poland and a neighbor on the right from Jamaica, or you know what I mean? Like, that's to me what it is. It's like, so there's nothing more British about your company than what it is. It's like the most British that could make.
It's a mishmash of
And
honest,
also,
to be honest, I'm glad to hear it.
No, for me, that's my interpretation of Britain. Like, that's not England. I don't like it. Britain. We are a mixture of, and look, you don't need to say even history to discover that anyway. Let's be honest.
You can go even more focused, and London is like this. I mean, London is a completely different, I would say, even country than the rest of the UK.
Yeah, I heard somewhere recently that London is technically its own country, according to law. I don't know if this was just some really strange internet rumor I heard, but apparently there's some legal reason why, and it's to do with finance. And it was very interesting. I didn't look it up, so I could be completely spreading misinformation. But there's something about that in a similar sort of way that the Vatican is considered a legal entity.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I remember during the Brexit days, there was that argument where people were like, "Oh, London should turn into its own little city-state, essentially." So I remember reading something about that, but I don't think I remember fully what it was. So it could be something to do with the city of London.
Maybe I may have dreamt that. I don't know. But you mentioned about the competitor thing. That's really interesting because of course businesses need to compete. Right? Of course they do. But I think it's the attitude towards how you approach that's different, isn't it? But like you said about the collaborative nature of it versus the making it the main focus. Like part of something the process when starting a business as a founder is, of course, to do some sort of competitor analysis. That's very important. To understand the landscape, especially for understanding pricing points, what customers want, and so on. But I think some businesses or some business founders take that a bit too far and make it so integrated into their business that it's at every step of the way. We've constantly got to be monitoring what competitors are doing, constantly looking to try and steal away from them. And I think that's a kind of bastardized version of what we talk about when we say being competitive in your market and doing a competitive analysis. It's not the same thing. You need to focus on home. You need to make sure your room is tidy first before going out there and criticizing other people's, right? And so I think it's kind of that is the mentality that has shifted. And I've worked a little bit in Poland. I've worked with some Polish companies before. And I know what you mean by that. I have noticed that there seems to be a lot more of a focus, and having been in the boardroom a few times when these topics have come up with Polish companies, I seem to be the only sort of voice to say, why are we so worried about this? Like, there's enough business for everyone. Let's focus on our products. So, or if you're so worried about this company, then let's learn some lessons from them. That kind of thing. But you still need to compete, though. We need to understand that. McDonald's and Burger King aren't going to sit in the same room and go, "Hey guys, how can we work together?"
Exactly. But no, that's the thing. It's all about mindset, to be honest, and it's something we learned really quickly. But to be fair, we learned this in the UK. because, you know, we obviously grew up in that environment of seeing people being like, oh, this guy's a competitor of mine. I practically want him dead, you know?
Yeah.
But when we came to the UK, it was such a shock where, you know, we'd message a company that's maybe, let's say, twice our size, and we're like, hey, you know, we're doing this. Do you mind if we have a chat, not to try and sell you anything, but honestly to just ask you for your advice? And literally right before this call, we were talking to another IT company that are like 3 times our size. And the whole conversation was, we were explaining to them where we are from a financial point of view and everything like that, and setting the stage of what the company's doing at the moment. And then we just looked at them and we're like, when you were in this position, how did you decide on what's next?
Right.
And so we're literally talking to our competitors on how to improve our company.
Yeah.
But again, that's a fairly, I guess, let's call it new concept that not many people do, but it genuinely does work.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I suppose you're in a slightly different position to some, in a sense that, like, you know, you probably wouldn't advise one of your founders to do that in a certain
of
space.
Course. Yeah.
But the reason there is because, let's say someone's developing an app to do a very specific thing, there may be only 4 or 5 other competitors in that space, and so it's a bit different compared to agencies, of which there are thousands. So it's like you know that the chances of you guys crossing paths or competing for exactly the same business at the same moment is probably rare, right? You know, unless you're in the top 5. If you're in the top 5 of agencies consistently, then the top 5 might not share financial information, because then you're going to give each other the edge, and so, you know,
of course,
like, it just depends on circumstance. But yeah, it's a cultural thing for sure. But I think it comes from a couple of different places, right? Like as well. I think we're seeing a lot of that shift lead. A lot of the leaders make that shift because of, just like yourselves, a lot of these business owners and founders have gone to school together. Yeah. Like, you know, they know each other, you know, and then they've gone off with these different companies, and then they meet every year for, you know, a catch up, and they're like, hey, how's your company going? Yeah, no, not too bad. It's like, oh, what, you founded the same sort of thing as me, you bastard, like, you know. And then it's just like, well, you know, let's help each other out, you know. There's that too, as well as just I think the mentality of just let's all succeed, you know.
Yeah, that's true. My company is better, etc., etc. It's always a hard one, but we try to be very transparent on our side. We just speak with people. We try to kind of compete, but in a collaborative manner. And like you're saying, you know, if it comes to small companies like ours, in most cases we're not really competing with other companies. You have software agencies with exactly the same profile or very similar profile, but having access to a very different network. And I told them, because we were thinking at some point, you know, who are we actually competing with? You know, we can't name some random company from, I know, Bulgaria as our competitor, because, you know, we saw them in the news once. So I said, probably our competitors are companies that have access to the same network that we do. And anyone that does not have access to the same network is not our competitor. Yeah.
I suppose in your line of work, your biggest competitor are founders who are technically minded, right? Yeah. So essentially people who want to build it themselves. Like that's essentially your biggest competitor.
Yeah. If we speak about competition in this format, then like Netflix was saying, you know, they compete with sleeping. We do compete.
We all compete with sleeping.
We do compete with, you know, with having freelancers. We do compete with just hiring people yourself. But we also it's a hard one as well. I mean, there's a lot of complacencies around why people choose to work with an agency.
Oh yeah, of course. I once spoke with an agency like yours, a founder before of a software agency, who said his biggest competitor was stupidity. I like that, because I was like, yeah, that pretty much applies to everyone. You know, he's like, I can't overcome objections that are based on stupidity and lack of knowledge. I can't do anything. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, none of us can. You know, but you know, they're the ones you don't want. I said, and he was like, yeah, but sometimes they've got a lot of money. I'm like, well, you know, what can you do? You know.
Yeah, that's true as well. But like, speaking of founders with technical skills, thankfully, there is a very limited number of founders with very, very strong technical skills. Number one problem probably for any founder that wants to build a software product is finding a CTO. That's number one problem for everyone, because, well, thank God for that. I thank for this every day. There's a very small number of founders that are both really great at business and also very good technical people. And if there are like this, we see Microsoft, we see Facebook, we see Apple. They were all built by people with great technical skills and great knowledge of business. So
yeah, that's true. Like, so I'm in quite a lot of different sort of subreddits on Reddit, and the vast majority of the sort of founders or wannabe founders in the SaaS sort of startup ones are technical founders, but they can never really seem to get to that next stage because they have little to no business, or primarily sort of sales and marketing, commercial acumen, and that's their barrier. So they're looking for co-founders. And then in other Reddits, you've got the business sort of minded ones who have the idea and need the CTOs. And they have no idea, and there's no way that these two people could ever work together because they both have their own ideas. I sort of I almost want to start like a Tinder for this kind of thing, where it's like there's got to be two of you out there that have the same idea. Like,
there is a bunch of those, and they predominantly dominated by just business founders. It's really hard to find, because the technical people, they don't go out there. I mean, we work with developers who are amazing developers who don't know other developers. How is it possible that you're a developer with 10 years experience? You don't know any other developer. They literally just like to sit down and code in peace. They don't network. They don't go to those events. That's really hard for a business for a business oriented founder to get in the mindset of a technical founder, and that's why it's very hard for them to find people like this. Not talking about the fact that if you don't know technology, you speak with a potential CTO who knows some things and knows the business side. It's very easy for that CTO to oversell himself and throw a couple of keywords. That's why we call ourselves business-oriented techies as well in the company, because when we work with founders that are not technical, we are that that thing in the middle that kind of connects them with our technical teams. We know how to speak with our developers, and we know how to speak with the founders on the business side. And actually, tying to this is a very interesting topic. I think that the base of our success, or the fact that we managed to build a company beyond, let's say, that 10 people, 15 people, is, well, one thing is our partnership with Ali and our kind of relationship. But another thing is the fact that we are not technical people, and we don't know much about technology. We know enough to kind of mess around with the code, but we don't know enough to, I'm saying, myself and Ali sit down and actually code something and build a full platform. And it was super hard at the beginning, because many small companies start where you get the first client and you kind of serve the client yourself, do the service. And this is how many software development agencies started. But the problem with that is that the founder gets engaged in those projects, and they don't have time to actually build the company up. So that they get to a point where they maybe have 2-3 people to help out, and that they can't scale beyond that. And because we were limited and we couldn't do anything ourselves, the only option for us was to build it to a certain stage where we can, well, pay ourselves through the margins, not actually doing the work for the clients. Yeah.
So you were forced to almost step over that stage.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why we managed to build it beyond what a typical software developer could do. There's a lot of software development agencies that are built by developers, and they're usually very small, like 3 to 5 people. And the reason they can't go beyond that is because the founders are usually coding on the projects, and they're very scared to kind of step back, because it requires you to make money on the margins and build up enough margins to pay yourselves, especially if you have 2 founders. requires probably at least 10 people in the company to work on projects.
And then there becomes that inflection point based on that glass ceiling, doesn't there? Which is, you know, at what point do the founders expect to start being founders and step away and hand over the reins and focus more on building the business and client relationships and so on. Yeah,
that's an interesting kind of little thing I noticed with many other teams that we work with.
And it's interesting as well. You mentioned about some of the developers you work with who were you know, didn't know any other developers, and they're sort of very much in their own little world. That's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, what I was trying to say earlier about, you know, you can either become hyper focused on a specific area and skill to the point of like almost obsession, and become so good that you are, you know, sought after, right, as an expert on something, or the route that we're sort of area we sit in, which is this specialist generalist. And I suppose then there's the third option, which also we are seeing an increase of, which I mentioned a bit about earlier, which is the useless generalist, which is, you know, someone who's touched a few things and they think they know everything. And look, I am always worried that I might actually be in that category, because of the thing about being in that category is that you don't realize you were in that category. You think you're in the specialist generalist category. So I'm always a bit worried that, like, actually, shit, I might actually be completely useless. But thankfully, I think your business success will be an indication of that, right? So if you don't have any clients after a certain amount of years, then you're probably one of them. But no, I just find it interesting because it's, I mean, I suppose how do you have the self-awareness to recognize where you lay in that and where your weaknesses are? Because there is a risk of being a specialist generalist, as we've coined it, that you say, okay, I don't want to learn any more about this area because I don't want to be a specialist in it. I'm happy with my area of knowledge there. But equally, you know, there must be areas in which you're weaker and you maybe need improvement. So I mean, how do you guys sort of find a way of being self-aware enough or to know where you maybe need to spend more time to upskill and, you know, become more knowledgeable?
Ali, I think you're muted because we can't hear you. Or your AirPods maybe.
And they died.
They died.
Oh dear. Yeah, Jan, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, there's always a level of self-awareness. I guess, you know, that's up to a certain person. I think I'm quite self-aware of my shortcomings. And that's one of the reasons I work with Ali as well, because I'm aware that I'm not as good as in building relationships and just general sales as Ali is. I actually, well, funnily enough, I'm in the process right now of creating a curriculum for myself where I want to identify what kind of skills I might need and start working on them. So I think it comes with just experience with in working in the company. Now I think I understand better what are the skills I might need to hone to help our teams. But I also the second thing is I know I'm a generalist and I know when to step back. I won't be forcing myself to work on, you know, help out, for example, one of our developers in an area that I don't feel very good in unless it's absolutely necessary. So my role and Ali's role as well is just to tie things together and make sure that all of the specialists that we have work together towards a common goal.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's kind of the same with me. So one of the key things I think that really works well is between Jan, me, and Stan, our CTO, is that we're very critical of each other, but in a, you know, take it as a more of a constructural criticism type of way.
Yeah.
So, you know, we all know what are our skill sets and where we lack. So in my case, for example, is, let's say my method for business development is very sporadic in a sense that it's unpredictable in how it happens. Like I really can't explain, it just works. And Jan, on the other hand, is very well organized and structured and everything like that.
Very slow.
and very slow. So basically, we are exact opposites of each other, and the only reason it works is because we always meet in the middle. Where Jan would like to take a slow approach, I would like to take a really fast-paced approach. But throughout this journey of building this company out, we just slowly started realizing that like I need to get more elements from, let's say, Jan's methodology, and he needs to get more elements from my methodology. And essentially we just talk to each other about how we did this, how we did that, and just kind of consult each other on how to improve ourselves to a certain
I think in general, I think a problem, a generalist becomes a problem when they start working on tasks that include very deep knowledge. So essentially, it's not obviously true all the time, but essentially working and delivering, for example, projects for the clients. A task for myself as a generalist should be to facilitate the delivery of a project, not to deliver the project itself. So I need to find the right people to do it. I need to understand kind of which areas need to be covered, what kind of people need to be hired, and kind of tie everything together. And the problem becomes when I start, project managing the project, or I start doing QA, or maybe I start coding and I kind of learn myself and start doing some front end. This is the problem for generalists when they start to get more involved in things they should find the specialist.
Let the specialist take the lead, have the trust to do that, because that is, I suppose, that's a demonstration of that self-awareness to say that I know that I can't lead on this. And I suppose that's why. And maybe this is true for you. I'm assuming it is based on your success up till now. But I suppose that is why individuals with that approach as well will likely have a very high EQ for talent, right? And being able to identify talent. Because I think, and that's generally what I've noticed. Because what you're explaining and your dynamic and everything definitely is representative of some of the other founding teams that I've seen to be very successful, is having this dynamic. And that seems to always be one of the core attributes, as well as, at least with one individual within the founding team, has a very good eye for talent. And I think you have to, right? If you're not a specialist in any particular area, at the very least, I think there is a specialism in identifying talent to bring in to lead these projects and fill in the gaps that you may have.
But that's the thing. That's what a generalist is supposed to do. So that we pride ourselves that we're masters of none, but essentially what we're good at is.
Well, I think, Ali, we are masters. So a generalist needs to be actually a specialist, a specialist in communication. A generalist in other things. I think that's.
So it's communication, but it's also, I guess, being able to read the room. So understanding when is the right time to plug in X type of person, X type of specialist in. So it's having that general understanding of, or let's call it situational awareness. I think that's a better way of saying it. A generalist really needs to have great situational awareness so that he's able to actually bring in the right people to actually come in and execute whatever needs to be done. And that in and of itself is its own beast that you have to tackle. And and I suppose that just comes down to having to trying to put in place a process which is constantly evaluating the situation as well, right? Exactly.
So you're always, and that also, I suppose, works with accountability too, in the sense of you're constantly keeping each other accountable, but in some senses as evaluation, you're evaluating one another, you're evaluating the situation with the clients, and it's like, okay, well, like you said, with the situational awareness, we have got to a point now with this client where we need to move it to a different stage. We need to step away. We need to bring others in. I suppose also not working in a vacuum is very useful for that too, for the same reason, is that, you have each other, like you said, to bounce off one another. I think for myself, one thing that I always worry about in myself, like I said, is, am I that other guy? And a lot of that comes down to the fact that I work solo. And so my concern there is I have to try and double down on when I work with clients on asking for feedback as regularly as possible, because I'm aware of the fact that working in a vacuum and not having someone to call me out on my bullshit would mean that I could fall into that trap, like you said, Jan, of trying to take a project too far with a client when in fact actually I should recommend that they pass it on to someone else in their team, or maybe another specialist in my network. And that's always something that I'm very hyper aware of.
Yeah.
You know, so I can see that as becoming a problem for sure.
I do admire solo founders. Because I don't know how you guys are running businesses like this. I have no idea. Like, you know, without Ali, I probably wouldn't be able to sell anything, and I would be overthinking everything, just not getting anything done. I assume.
Likewise,
Well, Ali without me probably would descend into chaos and end up
in prison.
A homeless person.
Yeah, you took that much farther than you did for yourself. I like that. You would right. I'd probably be okay.
Here, it's like, you know,
I won't be okay.
Yeah, I'd probably be okay. We wouldn't have any clients, but I'd have a house. But he would be on the street. Like,
yeah, no, I think both. So the reason why I would be without the house is because if I'm let off the leash, essentially, I will go get the client or do anything like that and just take on a risky project without maybe looking at it in a more, let's call it, Jan lens. And that's the moment I'll get burnt. Well, in Jan's case, he would be sitting on a Miro board trying to plan out his business strategy for 50 years and never actually execute.
Right, okay. Yeah. But hey, I love a good Miro board. So
I hate the Miro board.
Yeah, no, I love them. I literally was making one before we jumped on the call, so there you go.
Love it. I do love this too.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting stuff. Like it's and I suppose do you find that you're coming across a lot of founders that are in similar positions to you in terms of this sort of, you know, dynamic, or is it more that are you coming across more solo founders, or are you coming across, you know, what's your general?
I think there has been a few. Well, a good thing has been that we met a couple of very successful founders that had a very similar or exactly the same dynamic as we do.
Right.
So, Ali, for example, the guys from the luggage. What was the name? The Stasher. Yeah, exactly, Stasher. So the Anthony and. What's the other guy's name?
I don't remember.
Yeah, so those guys are, I mean, they're very successful. Stasher is a company that allows you to kind of stash your luggage when you're going sightseeing or something like that.
I think I've heard of those guys. I've heard of them. Yeah.
Anthony Collins. They were featured in Forbes 30 Under 30.
Yeah.
And they literally had exactly the same dynamic as we do. I think one of our lecturers as well had a very similar business partner. So we noticed in the successful founders, you know, we can talk, for example, Steve Jobs as well, and they have co-founders that are very opposite themselves, and they have a very similar dynamic than to what we have. And we also met a bunch of unsuccessful founders who just have exactly the same person working with them. And that never ends. Well, I started my first business with a person who was quite similar to me, and it doesn't go anywhere.
I suppose because let's think about this logically, right? If we strip this down, it's about relationship. That's all it comes down to, right? And I think it's safe to, we can probably agree. I don't know, maybe you might disagree, but from my perspective, it's a good relationship is one that is prepared for change. And very importantly, changes together, right? So, you know, in romantic relationships that I've been in, for example, the ones that didn't work are when we grew up into different directions. We weren't collaborative in our approach in our relationship, and so we grew apart into different directions. And I've noticed that this is exactly the same thing in business relationships. But the thing is that the reason why that tends to happen is because if you're very, very similar, you're not giving each other any advice to be different, like it's, you know, or to change or to keep up with what is changing around you. And the reality is the world changes around us. And in business, I think that's amplified far more than in personal life, where you need to continuously ensure that you're adapting to the changing landscape. And unless you have someone that can identify your differences, then they can't point them out to say, you have a shortcoming based on how the landscape has now changed. You now need to fulfill You need to, adapt to that change. It's just, well, you are me and I am you. We are.
But
what
also,
we are,
also covering those shortcomings, themselves, because again, it's. I agree with the fact that we need to change, we need to develop, and so on. But there's only as much as we can do, and the more focus there is, the better. So I don't, for example, I don't feel great at going out and kind of kicking off a relationship, just going on an event and networking. Ali feels very good at it. I could probably learn this, but I can spend teaching myself more about finance so that we can keep our company healthy. And then Ali will cover this for me. So we almost you said about unsuccessful romantic relationships, but in the successful romantic relationships, after a while, you just become a single person with your spouse. Or girlfriend, right? Same thing happens here. We morphed into a single founder. And many people don't even say Ali, or they don't say Jan separately. They say Jan and Ali, and a lot of our partners say let's go and speak with Jan and Ali, not with Ali, for example. Not with just Ali.
And that's
sides of the same coin kind of thing.
Pretty much. Like, it's gotten to the point where yesterday, for example, he was away, and a client that technically he mostly deals with calls me and was asking me about some questions and stuff like that. And when I answered and everything, he's like, "Are you sure Jan is going to be okay with this and stuff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, don't worry. This is exactly what he would say." And it's like, it's just because of the fact that we've worked together for so long that we complement each other's to the extremes. So just like how he said, he likes to be extremely focused on some particular things, I'm the opposite. So what usually happens is I'm the guy who goes around and just jumps around everywhere, checks what's happening all around us. And then while he's focused, I kind of pull him out of his focus, and then we discuss together and focus on that. Then I disappear. He goes back to his thing. I go back to mine, and we just keep rotating like that, essentially.
Jan, with that situation, with that client, did you agree with what he said?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay, I'm just checking.
No, we usually agree, and like Ali is saying, I think, well, observing other people that work with other people, it's the kind of relationship we managed to build is quite rare, and I think it's the cornerstone, probably the main thing why we are on some level succeeding right now. And we discussed this.
It's organic as well, right? Like, you can't force this kind of thing.
It was natural, and thank God for UCL, because UCL is where we met. It's actually a funny story as well. I mean, it's a very short story, but I when we started our master degree, just before the start, I had a search of extraversy, let's call it.
Oh yeah, this
on Facebook. But we meet. Does anyone want to meet for a beer?
No. So every time he says it that way, and it's completely wrong. So has a tendency to be very robotic in the way he texts and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and I'm gonna find the quote. Yeah, there it is. And I quote. This is his Facebook post. Anyone would be willing to meet and get a beer today. And this perfectly describes the formality of how he texted his personality. And all.
Right.
It's hilarious.
It was I regretted it straight away. No one replied to me except from Ali.
Right.
We met with Ali as usual. Ali being Ali, he went to a completely different Honest Burgers that we agreed to meet at. He called me and say, I'm at the place, and I said, I'm at the place as well. Where are you? And he was a few hundred meters from the actual place, because he messed up some details. So we met over that.
Almost immediately, you're having to parent him.
Into
the right location.
So we connected over our dad's kind of experiences with their business founders, because they were badly burned by some of their co-founders, and straight away, fast forward, UCL gave us this environment where we could collaborate with each other, test out how we work together, and kind of try it out, which I am very grateful for. So we had a year where we could just spend time together without the complexities of running a business, because the problem is that if you find a co-founder on some networking event and you don't know how they work, and you straight go into the running a business, which is the toughest thing you can probably do. Right? There's gonna be problems, there's gonna be frustrations, you're gonna lose money, you will have to put money in. I mean, there is a very small chance that you guys will kind of survive it together without building that bond before.
Exactly.
But we managed to do it at UCL, and we were coming out from UCL and setting up a business. We already had this relationship figured out, and we managed to kind of solve all the problems that happened. We also have a set of rules, I think, that are quite important should be important for auto founders. So obviously, radical transparency, feedback, etc., in communication is key. But we also decided that we go into every single business together, no matter if it's something that Ali probably could profit mostly for, or maybe I could profit mostly for, like even buying flats for rent. We thought about this, and a lot of drama happens when the founder goes and does something on the side, and the other founder kind of feels excluded, or maybe not enough attention is given to him. So we decided as a rule, going forward, every single thing we do, no matter where it comes from, we do it together.
No cheating.
No,
it's not an open relationship.
No. Even the investment in AMC, Ali.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, I hate that.
we lost a bunch of money together on a meme stock. I got
that. I blame you for that.
I made £2,000 in 2 days, and the problem is that we didn't sell. We made a lot of money, and we decided it's gonna go to the moon, and didn't go to the moon. Now we are stuck with a bug, 60% down, and
Exactly. The one thing I'd emphasize about everything he was saying as well is all about just the transparency side of thing. And so it's not just transparency within, let's call it the business context, but it's even to the point of like personal context. We talk about everything that we're doing, where we want to live. If one of us is having any sort of trouble with anything else, everything is always laid out so that we can then use that information as context for whatever is going to happen. It's gotten to a point where it's like, if I needed to go on a date and I couldn't make it to the date and he goes instead of me, I think he could, he's me essentially.
I'm replacing Ali today.
I'm his stand-in.
The best example is in 2020, because when we started the business, the pandemic hit, and we went back to Poland. Ali went back to Bulgaria, and I also have a girlfriend now living with me in London, but she's more of a family person, so she really wanted to stay in Poland. She didn't feel good in the UK, so I had a moment of weakness, and we're running the company remote, and I said to Ali, should we consider maybe me coming to London every month for a week, but me leaving here and you go to London and do your thing. And Ali was straight away, he was open with me that, fine, if you need to do it, but at some point I might feel like I'm doing more work than you, because you're sitting in Poland, it will be comfortable, making more money, and then I'll be out there fighting. And thank God for that, because we decided to go to London. It's a very good decision. We have an office. I managed to kind of create an environment where my girlfriend is feeling good, and I bought myself a couple more years. And we don't want to stay in the UK forever, anyways. So we managed to make it work, and I think that was one of the key moves as well for our company to start growing. Because now when I come back to Poland, I feel disconnected from.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Ali, you could have kept that to yourself. You very easily could have just gone, no, I'm just being self. You could have doubted that feeling and thought, no, I don't need to vocalize that. That's not fair, or whatever. And I think we all do that quite often. We sort of go, well, someone's explaining to me their situation. It's what they want. It's not my place to say how I'm feeling. And I suppose that comes down to that skill that you talked about that you have, which is that situational awareness.
Yep. Exactly.
And that level of maturity to understand, no, this is important. The way I'm feeling right now actually is important. This is something worth vocalizing, and it may have potentially been the reason why you guys are still around, just because of that. And I'm sure there are plenty of moments that have occurred in your dynamic together like that from both of you that have kept you together for as long as you have been in this and successfully running this business, just because of you have decided to speak up at the right moment versus speaking up unnecessarily about something, and also probably the way you approach actually saying it, right? Yeah, because there's a way of saying that which can be quite combative, or passive aggressive, versus a way of saying it which can just be practical and constructive. And so there's a level there of communication, like you said, being specialists in communication, which I suppose is key, because that is 99% of any partnership, isn't it?
It really is, because it's like, even so before, let's say Jan moved back to London, for example, because I was based here before him, I got to go and meet a lot of our, let's call it, most important clients in person and kind of form a personal relationship with them. And the immediate conversation I had with Jan about this is, we literally spoke about the fact that I was having to check in whether or not he felt left out in any way. And it wasn't because, how should I say it? It wasn't going to go and directly benefit me if I know that he doesn't feel left out in any way, because I'm the one who's actually there and doing everything. But rather it's because long term this could lead to some turbulences down the line. It's just it's honestly all about open communication, and it's the same now with the company. So now we're going to be sitting in London. I don't think for the foreseeable future we're moving anywhere, but I've already told Jan that my plan is that if we eventually do expand to the Middle East, for example, I'd be very keen to move to Dubai there, and I would be fine to move there on my own, because now we're at a very different stage in our company's life and our personal life where we can actually allow for that to happen. But back in the day, it was very critical for us to both be in the room, because we were both trying to prove ourselves and both trying to grow this together. So it's a pickle.
yeah. And I suppose that's interesting, because I was thinking as well a lot about, as you both have been describing your working relationship with one another, about other founders that have had that I've encountered that have similar dynamics. And it's usually only ever two founders that I very rarely, I can't think of any circumstances where I've met more than two that work together, that have that dynamic. But what I've also seen is that when it comes to adding a third person to the room or a fourth person to the room, things start to break down. Like that's when turbulence hits. And which is why a lot of the clients I work with are at the scaling stage or just about to start scaling, because I call it the growing pains of a scaling business occur, where quite often the pressure of the weight of the task at hand crushes the foundations that were built beneath it, and even the best relationships can suffer because of this sudden new addition of a lot of more people, and they don't appreciate the relationships that's there, and sometimes they even try and manipulate those relationships that are there, and a lot of turbulence can happen. Like, do you ever foresee that as being a problem? Have you ever discussed that between yourselves and be like, how are we going to approach that when we want to start scaling and we need to start adding more people to our room?
So that's the thing, is we kind of do have that problem to a certain sense, right? In the sense that we do have other people who are at, let's call it, the C level, that advise us, that work with us and stuff like that. And it's, again, it kind of goes back to situational awareness, to be honest with you, because let's say a good example is I'm able to form a closer relationship with a certain C level. So for example, I think I have a closer relationship with our CTO, for example, than Jan does. And although they don't have a bad relationship, it's just that if times get tough, more like it would, and let's say Jan and I have some sort of agenda that we need to take care of, that if Jan presented it, we knew that it was going to be taken in a slightly more, let's call it, negative way. That's the moment where Jan and I would agree, and we'd be like, okay, rather than me presenting it to this person, you go ahead and do it because you have a better relationship with them.
Right.
And again, it goes back to transparency and honesty between us two, because and so by having that direct and open conversation between each other, we're able to assess the situation better and decide on, let's say, who has to manage which relationship, how it's supposed to go, for example. And the easiest one is the example with our CTO and let's say our accountants. I hate talking to my accountants, and I kind of think that they hate talking to me to a certain extent.
Right.
So it's like, if I ever need anything, I don't even bother asking them. I just talk it out with Jan, and then he goes and takes care of it, because it's just going to be less friction that way.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our CTO, for example. So it's just, I think being aware.
Yeah, Ali has a lot of social capital to kind of spend.
Social capital.
It's called. I think it's called social capital. The kind of.
Such a robot. I love it. Sorry.
The kind of energy you spend talking to people and so on.
I've actually heard that expression before, and it's been directed at me before. I've had someone, and I think it was actually someone Polish. As well, funnily enough, that said the same thing to me. Yeah,
maybe, but I do have a lot less of that. I'm aware of it, and it's not something I can also jump through and suddenly become super energetic and be able to speak with 1,000 people every day. So I'm really good at building relationships with a small number of key people, like for example Ali, that have that network behind them. And I usually, like I say. If there is something to be done, and I think that Ali has a closer relationship with that person, in many ways I just say, we need to do this and that. How about you go and speak with that person? And I won't be forcing myself into trying to build up that relationship beyond what I'm capable of, or going and trying to force this person to do something, even though I don't have enough relationship.
Yeah,
it's funny. Ego plays a huge part in this, all right. Yeah. And this is something I talk. Anyone who knows me will know. I talk a lot about egos getting in the way of success when it comes to founders. I have worked with some absolute asshole founders in my time, and I'm not afraid to put it out there, right? And the majority of the time, it's because they have such an overinflated ego and a sense of self-importance, where the decision-making processes in like the examples you've just given would have been, well, I'm the CEO, so I should be the one to speak to them.
Yeah.
And that's the decision-making process is based on status. It is ego-fueled, and it is me, so I should be the one to do it. And that is always where I see people fuck up. Like, you can easily, if you are self-aware enough and you are checking your ego enough at the door to be able to go, do you know what? We've got a junior member of staff, actually. They've got a good relationship with that client. They should be the one to break this news to them. It doesn't matter that I'm the CEO and they're junior. We know they've got a relationship, but when you have ego in the way, it doesn't allow you to do that. And time again, I see that fail.
So funny story, right? Is just because we've opened the topic of ego. So this is something that, I don't think we ever struggled with, thankfully. I think, but because the thing is, right, at least with us, the mentality, and I'll get to the story with this point, is that the mentality we have is that regardless of who they think is in charge or what's happening, to be honest, at the end of the day, it is just me and Jan. So it's like, if they think Jan is in charge, but they're still paying the bills, I still benefit off of that, and vice versa. It does not really matter. And a good example of that is we had a client that we worked with for 2 years, I think. And 1 year into the relationship is when they realized that I'm actually a co-founder, and they thought I was a project manager this whole time. But then again, I was like, first of all, I never really tried to tell them, oh yeah, I'm the co-founder or anything, because I didn't care. But then when they told me, oh, we thought you were a project manager, I found it funny. And it's like, yeah, good for you, man. I don't care. Think of it as whatever you want. I call myself the cleaner of the company. I'm the one so it doesn't matter. And it's about putting stuff into perspective. Yes, we do have, let's say, large egos, and we do have a level of, let's call it, arrogance and self-confidence. And I think every founder is a little bit narcissistic in that way. But But you know, at the same time, you have to
I
realize.
don't.
See, no,
I actually think I struggle with not having enough ego in this, in business.
Really?
'Cause you need
But
to
I suppose, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ali, but I
Yeah.
think what you might mean by that is that you must have a certain level of confidence or arrogance enough to want to start a business in the first place.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
In the sense of like, we can do this. I believe we can do this. Not necessarily any further than that.
Yeah.
But I think there is a certain amount of, or at least blind faith, you know,
Or stupidity.
or stupidity. Yeah,
I think we were stupid, you know. But it's that's the thing, is that you need to know when to throw your ego out the door, essentially. And some people really don't know how to do that because they think that they're better than this or they're better than that. But I think this ties back to the culture we were raised in. So, you know, in my case, for example, my dad was, you know, a Palestinian refugee who basically went from being barely able to buy bread to owning a construction company in Bulgaria now. And so when I was growing up, he would, anytime we'd go and visit Lebanon, he'd take me and we would sit in the refugee camp where he was raised, even though we had a nice house. But that's all because he wanted to put everything in perspective. And there was one conversation where I, as a kid, was telling him I wanted something, let's say like a PlayStation, and he told me no. And I told him why. I thought we were rich. And he just looked at me and he's like, no, we're not rich. That's my money, not your money.
Yeah, I'm rich. You're not rich.
Exactly.
yeah.
And it's like that type of culture is what kind of just taught me to put my head down and realize that even if I think I'm the greatest in something, I'm more likely than not, I'm more likely, you know, the more likely answer to that is that I probably am not, and that I should actually learn to just listen and just play the cards I have dealt, essentially. I've been dealt, sorry.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's funny. It reminds me somewhat of my childhood. I mean, I'm not saying I can compare to being taken to a refugee camp. I'm not making that comparison by any means. You know, I was born and raised in the UK, and I, you know, had a very comfortable upbringing. But when my parents were together, they ran a business together very successfully. My father ran a construction business, and you know, we lived in quite a big house, you know, in a nice part of town, all that kind of stuff. And you know, we did okay. Right. And I was aware of that as a kid growing up to a certain extent. But what my dad did to offset that, and I think in this concern, and maybe sort of, again, being a person himself that came from absolutely nothing, like, you know, literally dirt poor family background, he was aware enough, fortunately, for all of his other shortcomings at least, to be aware of enough of the fact that he needed to get me to come onto jobs with him and graft and learn the importance of hard work. And I would, as a kid, be, you know, getting paint all over me, getting bruised and cuts, and you know, hitting, you know, the hammer on my hand, trying to hit nails in, and getting frustrated and getting tired, and learning the importance of hard labor. And that, you know, like I said, for all of his shortcomings, I think was a very important lesson for me to learn. Because, you know, I could have very easily he could have not done that. He could have not bothered to do that. And it probably would have been easier than having a fucking kid on the job. But he took the, you know, probably would have meant he'd get the job done quicker and, you know, got paid sooner. But he took the time to do that. And if he had not, I could have very easily grown up to be a very spoiled, rich kid, you know, a mentality that didn't value the importance of hard work. And thankfully, because of that, I valued it so much. I wanted to get into the workforce as soon as possible. You know, and I actually didn't do anything academic until much later in my life. I went back to it, but I actually wanted to skip straight ahead into work. I had a slightly opposite, in the sense of interaction with academia as both of you, where once I realized what I wanted to do, that's when I went to academia. It was kind of like the other way around, and that was kind of like to cap it off.
Yeah, it was like when I was anytime my dad forced me to go like to the office or to the construction sites or all of that, I was basically his what do you call it? There's this word in Bulgarian, I don't know what it is, but it's like
an apprentice kind of thing.
Not even apprentice. We have this word which is basically just a guy who does everything. So if boxes to be picked up, you're gonna go and do it, and that's stuff. And it's like I remember a couple of times where I'd go and be like, yeah, I'm too tired, whatever, and maybe hungover from a party as a kid, and my dad would just look at me. He's like, I tell him I'm hungover, I don't want to come in today, and he's like, well, tough shit, get ready, you're coming. It's like you're dealing with that. That's your problem.
Yeah, because that's the way the world works.
Exactly.
The business doesn't care if you're hungover.
Exactly.
You still need to come in and do it.
Yeah. And it's like I was describing to him all of the problems we were having when we started off. Like I remember complaining to him that we could barely make we could barely make a good living, paying rent and living in London and stuff, and it was really difficult. And I remember just complaining to him about it, and his first reaction is, good, keep struggling, that's good for you.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
That's such a dad thing to say, isn't it? It's like, well, good, you're learning. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. You're on the street, you say, oh, you were attacked by a group of wild dogs, you say, oh, okay, good, well, keep learning. You only have one leg and one arm, like, good, carry on.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah. You can make this call, so you're okay. Yeah, it's funny. Tough love, right? Tough love.
Exactly. But it goes back to that. It goes back to that persistency. That's what really teaches you when to throw your ego out the window, because you have to. And it's like one of the key things is that no matter how successful you are, there's always going to be somebody bigger than you, in a sense that you're always going to be undermined by somebody else, and you need to learn how to take that to your advantage, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose it's all about balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Because out of everything we're talking about, it's very easy to go further one side to the other on every single area of over communication, under communication. Confident and arrogant, right? There's all these different directions, and with this, it's exactly the same, which is like you can aspire to be like those individuals you mentioned, the bigger fish out there, or you can get sort of disheartened by it to a point where you don't even start.
Yeah.
And it's like, finding the balance between that of, well, we're never going to be that, so why even bother? And I think that's actually the reason why a lot of people don't even start doing something a lot of the time.
Exactly.
It's because they just think, well, what's the point? I'm never going to be Steve Jobs, so what's the point of even starting? It's like, but you can try.
Yeah, but exactly. You can try, and that's the thing. You don't have to be, and this is something we keep preaching to ourselves, is that although we find a lot of influence from, let's say, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and we love reading up about their history and how they went from zero to hero.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we want to turn to that, because, at some points it could turn into a very stressful and lonely life. When you get a certain degree of success and stuff, which is not what we're after. What we're after is, well, to put it in its simplest terms, regardless of it's with this company or whatever other venture we make, it's honestly just to have a good, stable, and happy life that has a good work-life balance, and that's it. You want to know that at the end of it all, you're having an impact, regardless of how small it is, whether it's just on a singular employee and their family, or whether it's changing the world. But it's about the fact that, at least for us, we'd be happy to just know that we've made some sort of lasting impact, whether it's on one person or thousands of people. And that's, I think, what keeps us going, essentially. And it even ties into when we first started this company off, my first ever panic attack, and this goes back to stupidity. So we started the company confident, not caring whether we're losing money or making any money, because we were young and we could afford to do that. But then we realized the first ever company Christmas party that we did was the moment where I actually had a little bit of a self-realization with Jan, where we're sitting and we're seeing everybody drinking, having fun, all of that. And at that moment, I was sitting there and I wasn't happy. I was petrified, mortified, just looking at all of the employees having fun. And I'm like, oh my God, all of these people rely on me, and I have no idea what am I doing in life. And it's that moment where we felt a sense of responsibility, essentially. We need to make sure everything is going right, and if we're able to ensure that all of these people are happy, that means we're going to be happy. It's a big responsibility, isn't it? And that's interesting. I can only imagine the sort of weight of that situation with once it starts becoming clear.
Yeah, I've heard that from other founders before. Actually, that they have that moment of clarity at some point on their journey. Usually it's at some sort of social event, and it's like, oh shit, wait a minute, these are all actual people with lives. I've now met their boyfriend or girlfriend for the first time, or their father, their husbands and wives or kids, and I'm like, oh shit, like if we fail, they fail, and that's quite a daunting prospect, isn't it?
Exactly. And worst part about it is that, like, for example, okay, now we're fine with it because we feel safe and everything, and we've gotten used to it. But another one of the scary moments was when we gave. So there was a story about one of our employees telling us about this kid, which is funny to say, which you'll see why it's funny, is that is interested in IT, doesn't have any work experience and whatever, and our CTO wanted to give him a chance. And told him, sure, of course. We met him, he seemed hungry and he wanted to like actually push himself. So we brought him on, and now he's one of our best developers. But the funny part is when he came in as an intern, he was my age. Literally, I think he was even a year older than me.
Right.
And it's like, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, this guy is 1 year older than me, and he's an intern at our company. And I'm just, I'm like, what is happening? I don't know how to feel about this, how to cope with this and stuff like that.
Well, and that's where imposter syndrome can get you, right? That's where it can sit there and fester. And like you said, that's where a certain healthy amount of arrogance or confidence is useful.
Yeah.
To sort of then shove that away and go, no, actually, fuck it, we can do this. We know what we're doing. We let's remember our achievements. But it's funny, just to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago about looking up to certain millionaires or billionaires and other successful people. I remembered very briefly then a moment. I was in a webinar like last year or something like that, and I don't remember the specific topic of it, to be honest. It was a period where I was joining lots of different things, but there was a time in it where they had a load of slides and they were showing companies that no one had ever heard of. And they were like, I want to show you a load of these companies, and they were going across, and they're like, does anyone recognize? Put your hand up if you recognize, or comment on it if you recognize any of these companies. And then it went through, like, it must have been about 20 of these different companies. No one had any idea what they were. I'd never heard of them. And then they ended by saying, well, just so you know, every single one of the companies I just showed you is worth a minimum of like, $1 billion or something like that. And I guarantee you, none of you know what they are. None of you know the CEOs, the founders. It's like most millionaires, billionaires in the world are anonymous. No one knows who they are. Most successful people don't get on Twitter, buy Twitter, right? Become a meme, go on Joe Rogan. Like they're busy running their business. And then this woman who was running the webinar said, and by the way, the first slide I showed you, run by one person. Every single business on that list was run by one person. And then she said that the next more traditional sort of startups, it's like, just goes to show there's no specific way it needs to be done. It's just the desire to get it done. That's
exactly. And it's like you're the one who basically defines what success means to you. So when I was in Northampton, I met somebody on like one of the lecturers on the business course there, and one of the lecturers there is a millionaire. And I remember, again, this goes back to my arrogance and I guess just because of my age. When I met him and I was asking him, what does your business do and stuff? Well, he essentially told me, oh yeah, I made my millions selling fish. And I just looked at it and I kind of laughed at that. I was like, you're kidding. And he's like, no, I'm being that serious. And it's like, good on him. And now I look at him now and I'm like, holy shit, that's fucking genius. How did you do that? And it's the same thing that happened in UCL. We had a lot of guest lecturers come in. One of the guys, basically, all he does as a business is he's basically not a drop shipper, but I just call him an extreme drop shipper because all he does is he finds trends. He has a factory in China, and if he sees that socks are trending now, immediately makes a brand for socks and just builds that up as quickly as possible. And if, let's say, another day something else is happening, he'll immediately buy, let's say, disposable vapes, and he'll buy thousands of them and just sell them. But for him, that's what entices him. That's what makes him happy. And I'm like, you're such an undervalued person, and it's just amazing to see what you do.
Yeah. It's funny because as you were explaining the first part of that, I was thinking about drop shippers. Because it's become. There's always a negative side to everything, right? And like we talked about, the sharing of information and how it's easier than ever to start a business. The tools are there, like anyone can start one from their living room. And this recognition of what we were just talking about there, which is that you just need to have the drive, you define your own success, anyone can do it. It's all great, but what you do end up with as well is this sort of subculture that is quite toxic of just, anyone can do it, without actually the recognition or I suppose the desire to make clear that not everyone can actually do it. And there's a sort of this odd area you enter into, which is like, how can you tell someone to try and recognize that maybe you don't have what it takes? And that's difficult. Like, I always think back to things like those singing shows, where people come up and they sing terribly, and then they don't take the criticism that they're shit. Like, it's really difficult because, and clearly no one's ever told them that they're shit. And that's why, or maybe they're just too stupid enough, it's like, how do you put out there? And of course, there are plenty of people profiting off this, selling courses and all this other shit. So they have no incentive to want to tell people that they aren't, to be self-aware. But like, at what point, how do we put it out there? And at what point can we communicate with people that maybe this isn't for you? Like, we need followers too. And there is something very admirable about being a very good employee and a very good follower. Like, we need people to maybe be more focused on that just as much. We don't have courses to teach you how to be a really good follower. Maybe we should.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like, let's say, for example, take my friends. I have a lot of friends who, work really exciting jobs, but at the end of the day, they're considered employees, and they love what they do, and they've always been. I think the issue is that a lot of people fall in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur because of all of these Instagram influencers telling you, "Oh, I made my millions in the span of 6 months." Yeah, but they never really told you about all of the work that went behind getting to that point. And so a lot of my friends, for example, when they saw us getting to the point where we are, they'd all look at us and be like, "Yeah, one day I want to start my own business as well." And I'd immediately tell them, "That's amazing, good for you. You should try it if you think this is something you want to try. But one thing that you really need to take into account is remember all of the times that you saw me struggling, you saw me stressed, and you saw me going through all of this. It's not as easy as you think, and it's very challenging at times, and 99% of the people might fail. And it's like, you need to be aware of those risks. You need to be aware of what might be coming up in terms of stress. And you need to then be able to make a conscious decision on whether or not you want to do it." Then again, I say all of this, and I'm basically going into the do as I say, not as I do, because I was not aware of any of this as well.
Well, and that's the thing, is like being ignorant to it can actually be what leads to success.
Exactly.
And actually, similar to like what we were saying about, looking at the Elon Musk of the world and thinking, well, I can never do it, so why even try? Giving someone that advice could potentially deter them from being great, because then they think, oh, well, shit, I didn't realize that there's that much struggle. I didn't realize it took you 8 years to get there. Like, oh, well, I'm not going to bother. And in fact, if they had, they might, and been ignorant to it, they might have done really well. Because sometimes the less you know about, the potential pain you're going to encounter means you actually experience less of it.
Exactly. And
that's exactly what we did when we came out of uni. So we didn't have any knowledge, any industry experience, any experience at all as well. And I think that's why we kind of decided to do this. I would be terrified right now to set up a business from scratch in that format, and I'm not sure if I would be able to do it. Well, obviously now we have the network, we have the resources, so it would be much easier. But setting it up from zero was hard, and many people don't realize how much struggle it is. Like Ali was saying, day to day, every business tries to show themselves like the best business on the outside. Every founder tries to show themselves like the best, most successful founder on the outside. And people rarely speak about the struggles. Even in the books, what we read about is not day-to-day struggles, day-to-day problems that people go, which is the hardest one, to keep consistent. But we read about some, a few major events within a person's life that kind of led to something great.
Yeah.
But how much?
But that it needs to be aspirational, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's the balance to have. Is like we're saying, you don't want to put someone off.
Yeah, that's the issue. Yeah.
I mean, it's like think about it. Do either of you have kids?
No.
Okay.
We're too young for that. Way too young for that.
Okay. So I've got two, and well, if you've ever spoken to, I don't know if you've ever asked your mother, right? If you had known what it was like to have a kid, would you have had a kid?
Yeah.
Vast majority of mothers would have said, no fucking way.
Yeah.
Right? And the only reason why they end up having more is because they kind of forget, there's even a biological solution to that, which eradicates the memory of the pain suffered through childbirth. Because if you could remember it vividly, you wouldn't ever do it again, right? It's the same kind of thing. Like, if you really knew what was coming, then yeah, you probably wouldn't do it. I definitely wouldn't do it again. If I looking back at my career, I would have. Part of me sometimes think I would just like a nice, comfortable office job working for someone else. Yeah. If I had to do it all over again, because of the ups and downs and the stress that it caused. Yeah. But it's difficult because you don't want to put other people off.
Exactly. But I do.
A business is very similar to having a kid as well. I mean, it's
very
similar.
Yeah, and that's it. When women say men don't know what it's like to go through childbirth, say, "Well, I run a business, so."
Yeah, and that's the moment you get canceled on social media.
And they'll appreciate that 100%. They'll be like, "Okay, fair enough. Yeah. It's the same thing."
It's the thing is that it's like it's all about, but again, everything we're talking about right now and how none of us would want to start this all over again. We're all saying that in hindsight.
Yeah.
The thing is that if you look back when you did start, yes, there was a mixture of arrogance. There was a mixture of, let's say, enthusiasm and ignorance.
Yeah.
But there was a high degree of arrogance because all of us have gone through in one form or the other some sort of situation where we were working for somebody. And not that we're not now, we're just working for somebody now in a different relationship.
Yeah.
But what we were thinking is, I could actually do better than you, or I think I'm better than you in this sense. And so that's when you try and again, it's a mixture of ignorance, self-awareness, and egoism, and everything into one.
It's just, again, it comes down to that word balance, right? It's about having a healthy amount of arrogance, or a healthy amount of self-awareness, a healthy amount of even the opposite of those things, of like we talked about, what's the word? Why can't I think of the word? Doubt, whatever the other word is for it. You got to have those things in equal measure, I think, to succeed. But I suppose, and that puts you in an ideal position to be able to help your founders.
Yeah, exactly. And also, in addition, is I think another driving force once you start is that if you don't have a plan B, that's it. There's no other plan but for this plan. So as in, this company works, that's good. If it doesn't, well, it has to work. There's no other. Well, we can do this.
Yeah.
I think it all.
I'm curious to know your CTO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone presumably you brought into the company later on, right?
Yeah.
So how did you approach hiring the CTO?
It was all based on emotions, to be honest. So
right. Okay.
Basically, and this is a really interesting story, actually. What happened is we hired somebody who, again, is now on one of the most important projects that we have. He's amazing, and he's leading a big team and all of that. So we hired him, and he was our, I think, most talented dev at the time when we hired him. Now, not that he's not anymore, but he's still very talented. And we had a really weird relationship starting out, in a sense that he took this as a full-time job and then took a second full-time job and was working at the same time on both. And we told him secrecy, and we told him, hey man, again, transparency, told him, either choose us or them, because we're not okay with this,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And we asked him, I'm like, is this because of money, or what is it? Maybe we can accommodate for you to leave that other job. And we built a relationship with him. And one day I was talking to him with Jan, and we told him, I think it's time for us to find a CTO. he introduced us to his mentor, which is our now CTO, who was working for a different company. And when we started having conversations with him, it was a very weird conversation, in a sense that the first time we met, we're, hey, this is what we do, whatever. Okay, interesting. Second time we had a conversation, he started asking us questions about the business and essentially flipping everything on its head. So he'd ask us like, oh, what do you do now? What's your methodology for project management? And we'd look at them and we're like, what's that? And at that time we had 10 people. And he's like, you fucking idiots. What the I'm not even kidding. Literally, that's how he started. And he just started berating us, and basically anything that we showed him, he would basically be like, you're doing everything wrong. What the hell is this?
Yeah.
You know what?
Well, then that's the guy you need, right?
Exactly. He's like, how the hell did you survive until now? What is this clown fest? What the hell? And he went crazy on us. And so we kind of built a relationship with him over time, where he was working just part-time with us. Eventually, he got to a point where he was comfortable with us and we were comfortable with him. And we're like, hey, man, I think it's time for you to abandon ship and come join us. And so that eventually happened. And he's been with us ever since.
Yeah, that's the guy you need, right?
Yeah,
the one that's just like, guys, you're gonna fuck this up unless you have someone like me in your business. So,
no, he didn't use someone like me. He was just telling us. He's like,
pointing out.
He's like, you fucking fuck up. What the fuck is this? How the hell did you survive until now? He wasn't trying to sell himself in any way, but rather he was trying to give constructive criticism in his own way. And
the truth is that you find the best CTOs when you're not looking for a CTO.
Yeah.
If you start looking, the moment you start looking, you start finding shit CTOs.
Yeah.
I think it's because when you look actively, the people you find as a business-oriented founder on the platforms you think you'll find them are not the right people to be CTOs. CTOs, I think, hang out somewhere else. I don't know where.
Yeah.
Well, they're probably already hired, right?
Yeah, so they probably, that's also another thing, all the best developers right now are engaged in the projects.
Yeah.
If you find the developer, well, obviously there's exceptions, but you need to understand that all the best technical people are engaged in something right now, which means they're not going around networking events looking for opportunities, most likely. It's something you find through connections. You ask your friend that runs a business, and he tells you, I know this guy. I've been working with him for like 10 years. Speak with him.
Yeah. And it goes back to also context of your experiences. So, for example, in our case, if we went and got a headhunter, we would have never found Stan, our CTO, because he had a very interesting background where he is a very talented developer, but he had this entrepreneurial spirit. And he, before leaving the company he was working at, he had his own business, his own software agency that he had to shut down because his co-founder basically stole all of the money from the company and ran away to, I think, Thailand or something. Jesus. And so he was left to foot the bill. So he had to go and pay his 10 employees their last month's salary and fire everybody and close the company. But he didn't have the money himself. So what he was doing was actually he took 2 full-time jobs on, and he would work, both shifts in order to collect the money, to save up the money so that he can actually go and pay back his employees because the company went bankrupt. And so realistically, this person was extremely engaged with other stuff, extremely tied up with other stuff. And it was honestly by luck and by chance that we were able to even meet him and talk to him and all of that. And that background he gave us is one of the reasons why we also wanted him to work with us, because just like us, he had a very similar background in a sense that he's gotten screwed over in one way or another by a business partner or by something like that. And at the same time, he's a very open and transparent person that says what's on his mind. And if he thinks and I quote, if he thinks you're a fucking idiot, he will tell you you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah. So it's a demonstration of integrity, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the common thread with a lot of individuals that get on well together, is they have a solid moral foundation and a decent amount of integrity. Yeah. That can't be moved, it can't be shifted. Exactly. There's something that I've got in trouble over with past employers. It is, and maybe, I don't know, either of you might sympathize with this, is, when I've worked with past employers that I believe have done questionable things, I haven't moved, and that's got me in hot water because they expect you to move along with the slightly questionable activity.
Yeah.
But for me, it's you know what helps you sleep at night, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with us. We try to avoid that type of culture where we don't want people to feel like they have to follow us with whatever decision we make.
Yeah.
But rather, what we actually try and do is we incentivize people in the company to, essentially challenge us. And we hold quarterly meetings with everybody in the team where we explain everything that's going on with the business, from strategy to financials to everything, to how much runway we have, all of it. And we put it all on the table. And this is intentional because we want them to take that home with them. We want them to think about it, and we want them to be able to not only challenge us as and our leadership, but also challenge our clients. And we've had full-on productive arguments with, I'd say discussions. I call them arguments because it's just fun to say it that way. But they're actual.
I like the word argument. I use because if that is the true meaning of the word argument.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so where we would be sitting with the client, and I would agree with the client's approach, for example, while our developers would look at them and be like, guys, no, you need to convince me that this is the right approach. They're like, I don't agree with this. I think you guys need to do it this way, that way, and that way. And this goes all the way from the senior developers to the CTO, to the junior developers, or to the interns. And we want to keep that within the company that way. And we know that it's unrealistic to keep it this way if we ever turn into, let's say, 100-man team, which is partially why we don't ever want to become a 100-man team. Because that's the value that we bring to our clients, is that transparency and that willingness to challenge them, even if they think they're industry leaders or domain experts or anything. And
that's interesting. So that's just made me think of a question for you both. What is your idea? Because we talked a minute ago, we were talking about the growing pains to do with a business that grows out to a certain point.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on growth at all costs, right? Because in business, this is what we're taught, is you build a business and you grow, and then you grow, and you grow, and you grow. And I've got to this point in my life where I'm starting to think that maybe isn't a very good philosophy to have.
Yeah.
That you can get to a point of being comfortable, just maintain.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that?
So I think in my opinion, and Jan is going to go into a lecture for this, so I'll say mine first. But the short answer to this is that I think that's a very capitalistic mindset, in a sense that it's, you're either growing or you're not. But realistically, that doesn't have to be the case. Obviously, when you're starting off, the expectation is that you are growing, and that's healthy. But there comes to a point where too much growth, in my opinion, can lead to toxicity, and can lead to, let's call it, desensitization of what the company values are, what the mission was, and what the whole team relationship was.
It becomes diluted over time, right?
It does. And so in my opinion, it's like, yes, you should be targeting growth, but at the same time, that shouldn't be the end goal, because at least we live by the philosophy that, we work to live, not live to work. And so at the end of the day, you need to understand what is the sweet spot for you. I don't want to be thinking when I'm 50, how do I grow this business into something bigger and bigger? Instead, I probably want to just, sit at home, be with my kids, just have a nice life. It's great to think about growth when you're younger, but at the same time, there's things more important than just trying to grow your balance sheet and all of that. At least that's my take on it. How about you, Jan?
I do agree. I mean, we went. I think I'm just finishing a WeWork book, by the way, which is exactly what this question is about: unsustainable, massive growth, and just focus on growth. I feel like a lot of young founders as well, especially if they want to start a startup, they are taught at schools, they are taught through books that all that matters is just growth. And they need to go and get crazy amount of money. They need to get millions, and that's gonna be the only way to succeed in business, when you start burning through the money and set up a unicorn. And no one really speaks, even at UCL at our course. No one speaks about bootstrapping a business. No one speaks about building a lifestyle business that is maybe not growing like crazy, but is sustainable, and you might actually make much more money on those businesses than running a crazy startup, getting yourself involved in like a 10-year endeavor where every day you can lose the business itself.
Which is what we've seen happen, right? With the startup bubble bursting. I mean, it's businesses that don't make money. They rely entirely on debt.
Yeah,
exactly. And we went through that mentality as well at the beginning. We've been growing relatively fast. So since we started, well, I can't speak about the first year because we make a very relatively small revenue. So we grew 10 times in the first year. And then we were doubling every single year. So this year we doubled as well, and we probably expect to double or maybe a little bit less than double next year. So the growth rate is relatively high, but we went through a time when we were doubling over the past 2 years where the growth was not sustainable, and it almost killed our business as well.
Yeah,
right.
So right now we decided, well, sustainable growth is probably the keyword here.
Exactly.
How do you grow, but at the same time make sure that you have the right foundations to grow.
Yeah.
We probably even took a step back to fix our foundations and then restart the growth.
Yeah.
But again, not enough people speak about running a normal, profitable business that is probably will make you more money, will cost you less stress, will allow you to have a family, a girlfriend. You don't need to sleep at the office under the desk.
I suppose that's the difference between like the startup culture and brick and mortar business culture, right?
Yeah.
So like you spoke about, Ali, that guy that you met that made his millions selling fish. There are businesses out there that on the high street, everywhere we look, that are just they reach a certain size, and that's their size. They can't grow beyond their walls, necessarily, or nor do they want to. Like, not everyone wants to open a corner shop and then own every corner shop in the UK. They just want to own a successful family-run business that pays the bills and gives them a good lifestyle. And there's nothing wrong with that level of ambition to say, I want to get to this point, and then I want us to focus on a strategy of maintenance. To have this empire secured, and then maybe to pass this empire over to the next generation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And you're absolutely right, Jan, when you talk about how I think the messaging is about, it's very focused on investment. And as an angel investor myself, I can tell you, I'm part of the problem. I know I am. Because as soon as you bring in a shareholder whose entire incentive is your growth, then you're fucked. Because maybe not at a level of an angel investor, but especially when you start looking at VC, where they're looking to invest in the next unicorn. You must make a minimum of $1 billion within the next 7 years. Otherwise, it's not. They haven't, got the return on their investment. And that does encourage, that incentivizes a very different kind of approach to growing a business and the strategies involved.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to WeWork. So just focus on growth, and profit is gonna be figured out later on. That happens to a lot of startups too, and that's why we spoke about things like not hiring people on full time, because one of your metrics is how many people on employment contracts you have. Because the company just looks bigger, but at the same time it creates so many risks that you'll be much better off having a bunch of contractors and maybe just you and your co-founder in the middle. So again, we need to normalize running normal businesses. Because in many cases it's a better solution, it's a better decision for the founder to go in that more sustainable road than try to kind of prove them, that they can grow a crazy business without any limitations over the months or years.
Yeah, and it's funny because it goes back to what we said right at the beginning, which is about how I do think there is a shift happening in the way businesses employ and work with other functions. So like yourself, using an agency like yourself to be their development function, their technological function, and others as well. And like you said, contracting employees instead of having them full time. I think the structure of organizations is changing in no small part due to the sort of financial crisis we find ourselves in, that has been headlined by the failure of tech startups, and underpinned by the failure of the investment sector as well, that has fueled that. And I think it's made a lot of first-time founders realize, this isn't how I want to do it. I want to do it my way. I want to bootstrap. I want to upskill in sales techniques, and I want to get that first revenue myself and build organically. And it just like, when you sit back and look at that, I just can't help but think back to my father's business and what my father taught me, which was, when you make a business, you've got to make more money than you spend.
Yeah.
That's the business principle.
That's true.
And I'm like, fuck, it's that simple. Like, why have we complicated it so much?
Yep.
Give a product that people want, or a service that people want, and ask more money for it than you are spending to give it. It's really not that complicated, and we need to maybe go back to the drawing board a little bit there, even when it comes to SaaS models and all that. Because, I think that the trends do have the general tendency to get manipulated into this conveyor belt way of making money from someone at the top. Look at crypto, look at AI, look at NFTs, look at entrepreneurship. It becomes a monetized thing in itself, which distorts actually the foundation of what the actual thing is,
No, I agree. And it's even with my dad, it's a very old school mentality, and I'm very aware of that, but I also do believe it in a sense that when I was telling him about Jan and I's failed investment in AMC and all of those meme stocks and cryptocurrencies, he just looked at me and he's like, well, while you're doing this, he's like, when I was explaining what we're doing, he just responded with, yeah, that all sounds too complicated for me. I like being in control of my money and knowing that if I do this, that there's a risk of me losing it, or there's a chance of me gaining X percentages as profit, and just having that control myself rather than almost throwing numbers into some slot machine and seeing what happens. It's a very old school mentality, but it's true for a majority of us.
And look, to be clear, I don't have anything wrong with VCs and the investment sector as a whole, but I think the problem is that there becomes this reliance on this, where like you said, Jan, the perception is, I've got to come up with an idea, I've got to build an MVP, and then I've got to go out and get investment. And it's like that's the path to success. And if only it was seen as one way of doing it, that would be a healthier way. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but there's better ways of doing it for sure.
There is.
I unfortunately have to go though.
I was about to say we've been talking for ages. I didn't even realize how long we've been talking for. So look, it's been lovely speaking to you both. Thanks so much. Look, this is the pilot conversation. As you can tell, it's pretty chilled out. So we might do it again. But yeah, you're both happy for me to share everything we talked about online today. Nothing that you would want me to edit out or anything like that.
No, nothing at all. Maybe just like blur Jan's face because he's a little bit ugly, but that's a difference.
Well, I would have to do the same to myself then, just in the matter of fairness. So, which probably wouldn't make it interesting
on every single one.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Exactly.
My brownish and beard as well.
I'll put a filter on all of us, like one of those TikTok filters, like give us lashes and stuff. That'd be fine. We'll look beautiful.
I love it.
All right, cool. Well, look, lovely to meet you guys. Hopefully we'll speak again soon. But great, amazing stuff that you've done, and hopefully your success will just continue. But don't grow too much. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.